Let's thread our needles. Now, I totally understand this might be one of the more challenging parts of your embroidery journey, so I'm going to give you lots of tips, and please do not give up, you will get there. Before we go any further, we are using a piece of thread that we've already prepared by knotting the end and unwinding the floss. And can you make sure you've got really good lighting? Like, I can't stress that more. Having good light shining on the area where you're trying to thread the needle will be so helpful. Okay, let's get into it. There are different ways to thread your needle. I'm going to show you here using 6 strands of floss, but I essentially like to hold the thread in my non-stitching hand and I hold it really close to the end, and then I actually lower the needle down over the thread. But I can already start sharing some tips with you because you can see that is going to be pretty tricky to get through the eye of the needle. So the first thing I do is I actually give the end of the thread a lick, and that makes it all clump together nicely. Now, you might notice that actually the thread's kind of got, it's not in a nice straight line, so one of the threads is a bit longer. So I'm just going to give it a nice little snip. Okay, the threads are kind of lined up in a bit of a row, so I've just pressed them together again, and now it's time to thread my needle. So I'm going to hold the needle, and I've positioned the eye right over top of where the end of the thread is, and I'm just going to lower it down over. Did you see that? It worked! So yeah, you just want to lower the needle down over the thread, and then keep going until you have a tail of about 2 inches. And that's how you thread your needle. Now, I absolutely understand that it doesn't always happen that easily. So let me just show you again. So let's say I'm trying that again, and obviously that's going to be really difficult. So as many times as you need, you can just go back and repeat. So I'm licking the end of the thread, and then I'm taking a look and I'm thinking, is it a nice kind of clumped together sharp area to thread? Oh, it's a little bit out of whack there, so I'm going to give it a little snip. The threads kind of come a little bit apart as I snip them, so I'm just going to bunch them back together. And now they're all kind of lined up in a row. So now I can try again, and I've got the eye of the needle, I'm holding it over, and I'm just going to lower it over the threads. Make sure you're using a needle that's big enough for the amount of floss you're using. Just keep following that process. Make sure your lighting's really good, and I am absolutely sure you'll get there. Let's look at how I want you to hold your needle, because the last thing I want is for you to, by mistake, pull it off your thread and have to go through threading it all over again. So this is my stitching hand, and this is the hand I'm going to hold my needle in. What I don't want you to do is to hold it like this. See how I'm just holding the actual needle, but the tail, the tail and the working thread, they're just hanging out there and nothing's keeping them in place. Instead, I want you to pinch that tail against the working thread as you hold your needle. And that means as we go in and out of the fabric, your thread will stay on your needle. So let me show you. I'm going to poke down to make my first stitch. As I reach under, I'm just instinctively grabbing the needle again in that position. Don't worry if you forget as a beginner. It does become second nature, but you kind of have to think about it a bit when you're first starting. So here we go, starting my next stitch. I'm making sure I grab my needle in that same way. I'll show you what will happen if you don't. So if you forget and you just grab your needle without pinching the working thread against it, it's just going to whip its way straight off your thread. You'll be left holding your needle. Your thread will be all on its own, and you'll have to re-thread your needle. Don't worry if that happens. You are not alone, but just try and remember to pinch the thread against your needle as you go, and hopefully your thread will stay on your needle and you can just focus on stitching along.